Hi YouTube friends, today we're going to talk about what I consider the five rock guitar heroes. Does that mean that a lot of other players not on this list are no good? Of course not. There's a lot of players, hundreds of great players in each style that we can talk about, but we're going to focus on five today. And the first one is going to be Mr. Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry was the first one that had a big influence in the rock music to come. He was influenced himself by T-Bone Walker. They said he adopted some of the T-Bone Walker techniques and showmanship. But Berry wrote Johnny B. Good. He wrote rock and roll music. He wrote some songs in the 50's. I got some notes here. He wrote songs like Maybelline, 1955, Roll Over Beethoven, 1956, Rock and Roll Music, 1957, and Johnny B. Good, 1958. So as you can see, he was an early influence. He also popularized the dog walk, walking like a dog on stage, and his one-legged, Chuck Berry step that he did. And he was a front man. He played guitar solos, he could sing, he could write. Like, again, he's considered a big influence, the beginning. He influenced teenage culture. His songs talk about high school, talk about fast cars, talk about the beginnings of consumerism. He is kind of the beginning of this sort of rock guitar hero culture, Chuck Berry. Okay, my next person on the list, it's going to be, of course, Jimi Hendrix, because this is a short list. I have to just jump to the important people. Hendrix was influenced by Chuck Berry. I remember seeing a VHS tape, a Veda tape, which he played Johnny B. Good. And Hendrix took rock guitar into the future in terms of the way he popularized the wah-wah pedal. He used phaser. He also used distortion. He cranked up those Marshalls to 10, and he played behind his back. He played over his head. He played with his teeth. He even lit his guitar on fire, as you can see here in the picture. And Hendrix was a hero for a lot of people. Even in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, he influenced people like Steve Ray Vaughan. He influenced people like Eric Johnson, like John Mayer. He has influenced a lot of people, the way he used distortion and his showmanship, the way he dressed. Chuck Berry was more conservative. When it came to Jimi Hendrix, he was flashy, a flashy dresser, and but Hendrix was influenced by a lot of blues guitarists before him. He was particularly influenced by Albert King and Muddy Waters. Again, nothing happens in a vacuum, I believe. All these players they build on the chops and skills of the players before them. Okay, so Jimi Hendrix is the second person on the list. Moving into the 70s, early 80s, my next person is going to be, of course, Eddie Van Halen. Eddie Van Halen popularized the use of tapping. He didn't invent it. There's people before this, even some classical guitarists use tapping, and some jazz guitarists use tapping too. So, but the way he started using it with what he called the Brown sound, heavily modified Marshall amplifiers, and the way he started using tapping was something that nobody has ever heard before. His sound was unique, although he used pentatonic scales, major and minor. His use of the pentatonic was very different. He was very lyrical. Almost when I first started hearing him, you didn't know what he was doing. He was like, what is he doing there? And then once people started figuring it was sort of some pentatonic licks, but he was using the pentatonic in very unique ways. He didn't have it didn't appear he had like a sequence of, he was following his patterns. He just appeared very lyrical, like he was improvising almost everything. If you want to hear a good solo of him, besides Eruption from the album Van Halen 1, is, of course, the solo on Beat It. He recorded the solo on Beat It, in which he used the fast tremolo picking and a lot of his techniques, some of the tapping and in that solo. So he influenced a lot of people. They say, somebody said a joke in the 80s that all guitar magazine covers had somebody, the cover had somebody tapping, even though these could be players that tapping was not part of their, of what they did, but everybody in the 80s was learning how to tap, including me. And so Eddie had a big influence. His sound in all those hair metal bands from the 80s, he had a big influence in a lot of those bands. He was an LA guy, but he influenced, the whole hair metal movement was sort of an LA movement to an extent, but he had a big influence in rock all to the 80s. My next person on the list is somebody that was very unique, and he came out. I first saw him play on a video with the band Alcatraz. His name is Yngwie Malmsteen. He was born in Sweden. He was very influenced by Niccolo Paganini and Johann Sebastian Bach. And his guitar influence, he cites Ritchie Blackmore as a big influence. But he was also influenced by Hendrix. He said he saw Hendrix at Monterey, and the way Hendrix burned the guitar and all that is kind of cool. And the first time I saw Yngwie, he was playing with his teeth, and he took the guitar and broke it into pieces and stuff, and very similar stage theatrics and antics like Jimi Hendrix. So he was also influenced by Hendrix, it seems, although he claims not musically, but of course, the way Hendrix carried himself. And he also did tapping, so it looks like Yngwie was also influenced by Van Halen, although his style was very... what he was playing in the electric guitar were the songs, it was very different. It was the beginning of an era called neoclassical metal. And there was a lot of players that came around that time, Tony McAlpine, Vinnie Moore, a lot of the players were using sort of, Yngwie was very influential. I remember when I started playing guitar in '84, and I remember reading a lot of music magazines, and everybody was asked the question, everybody that I can remember, have you heard Yngwie? And what do you think about him? And when he was younger, Yngwie wasn't he was very young, and he had a chip on his shoulder. He had something to prove. So a lot of times he made comments about other players that, oh my God, I sound like nobody. I wasn't influenced by anybody, things like that. So he wasn't making any friends at the beginning, when he was a young guy. He was 20 or even earlier when he started, becoming famous. So I remember a lot of people were when they're being interviewed in those magazines, they were asked the question, what do you think of Yngwie? Have you heard him? Do you think that's going to be the future? And because he was so fast, so accurate, and he was playing licks sort of like Bach and Paganini on rock solos. It was something that people have never heard. Okay. And my last person on the list is going to be somebody most recent. I wanted to, start with Chuck Berry, of course, then Hendrix, very influential. Then we went into Van Halen, that was influenced by Clapton and Holdsworth. And then the next person was Yngwie Malmsteen. And then my last person is a person by the name of Tosin Abasi by the group Animal as Leaders. And Tosin possessed all the techniques. He can play two-handed tapping. He can play the sweep picking like Frank Cambale. He can play alternate picking like Al Di Meola. He can play legato like Alan Holdsworth. He can play, top harmonics. Van Halen did a lot of top harmonics, and Tosin can do it too. He can do thumping, play like Victor Wooten on the guitar. So Tosin possesses a lot of techniques, and he is a part of a style called progressive metal. And progressive metal is kind of an interesting style. I started listening to heavy metal in the 80s. I got more into fusion and other things. But I've been listening to progressive metal lately, and it's an interesting style, especially I like more instrumental, progressive metal. And it has complex rhythms, and it has, the harmonies are very interesting, more modern harmonies, and the group Animal as Leaders, the group that Tosin is the leader of, they go from really heavy thumping and then to really sweet, to two-handed tapping, you know, parts of songs, and they do heavy, then they do some legato and some stuff. It's very interesting the way that their songs are constructed. Maybe it's not for everybody, but you know, music, that's one of the cool things about music. Music is if you're angry and you know, want to go out and beat somebody, there's music for that. If you feel romantic, there's music for that. If you feel happy, there's music for that. And if you you know, are burying somebody or go to church, there's worship music too. So music, you can find music, like, call it elevator music, supermarket music. Hey, maybe music to go shopping to. So music, it's a vast array of styles and genres and artists. So nothing wrong with people that like certain types of music over others. You know, I find, like, sometimes I talk to players and we have things in common about how we look at music, but they might be playing more of a metal and I'm playing more of an acoustic nylon string kind of style, and you know, but we can still talk about certain things, and also our styles are different. You know, music is it's an ocean. Okay, so that's my video for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. These ones, there's a lot of players missing, but these five, boy, these guys were a force to be reckoned, and Tosin Abasi is still a force to be reckoned with. Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.